Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to kick off this conversation of money as medicine as part of the Soil Not Oil conference. We hope you all have been enjoying the conference so far and are really pleased that you're joining us from wherever in the world you may be today. So I am excited to be in conversation with some wonderful folks. I'm Leslie Lindo. I'm the managing director for the Olamina Fund at Candide Group. And today I am joined by Joseph Curreton, Debbie Notkin, and Don Sherman, who are going to share a little bit about the work that they're doing and how we're actually looking at, the history of extraction when we think about our current economic system and the harm that it's caused in communities, and how money now can be used as a way to heal that harm. So I'd like to invite our panelists today to share a little bit about who they are, the work that they're doing, and then we'll get into a wonderful conversation. So I'd like to kick it off to, I think, Debbie. Would you like to share a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world? Oh, I think you're muted, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Notkin. I have been hearing that the most common phrase people hear in their lives these days is "you're muted," so that just happened to me. I'm the chair of a nonprofit organization called Friends of the Public Bank East Bay, and that's the East Bay region of Northern California. And I am here to talk about public banking as part of money as medicine and economic justice in general, but public banking in particular, as part of the whole concept of money as medicine.
Thank you, Debbie. Joseph.
Hey everybody, Joseph Curreton. I am one of the leaders of Oberon Cooperative. We are a worker-owned cooperative holding company. We really are, I think, in the context of this conversation, an example of an actor in the world trying to do business a little bit different. And so I think really what I'm excited today about talking about and thinking about is sort of how money moves through a system, and really some of the alternatives that we can actually experiment with today to get folks back in right relationship with money.
Excellent. Don?
Good morning. Hehani Washte Matakiapi. My name is Don Sherman, and I am CEO with Native American Natural Foods, and I also serve on the board with our nonprofit Tanka Fund, and also we have Tanka Resilient Agriculture. It is a holistic ecosystem within our Tanka family that brings regenerative ag to the forefront by returning buffalo to the lands, lives, and economies of our people. So that's really the passion. It's not just, my career, it is, my passion, my people, my culture. So that's kind of the money as medicine. The reason why I'm here is in order to heal, you have to address the trauma. So in order to have money, look at money from a different aspect and to grow with it, we need to look at it from a different way and how we're placing it within our communities.
Thank you for that, Dawn. And that's, I think, a perfect segue actually into this conversation. I think particularly when we look at how the traditional economic system of your community and the values alignment, and kind of really recognizing where it all began and how that was kind of stripped away as part of some of the original harm that has happened through this economic system. You wouldn't mind sharing that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, in order to heal, we have to address the trauma. You have to face, that trauma. And our people, or Native American Indigenous people, as you know, have a long history of trauma, the colonization, being placed on the reservations. Our economies was intertribal trading with other tribes, with other people that had traveled through. Also our buffalo, which provided our food, our economy, our shelter, our housing. They were the life givers. They are our sister nation. So there's a lot of honoring also too that we do with the animal itself. But the animal itself was our economy. So as a lot of people know, as the history came in and people started settling towards the West, the government had decided, you kill the buffalo, you kill the Indian. I mean, we've all heard that. So they decided to kill all the buffalo, from anywhere from 50 million down to, less than 1,000 animals. Today now, it is one of the economies that have been brought back by entrepreneurship. Bringing buffalo back has been led by the entrepreneurs, not it was decimated by the government, but it's being brought back by entrepreneurs, people that love this, to bring this keystone species back. And in order to do that, when you put us on the reservations after taking our animal and giving us commodities, programs, here you can have this program for this long, and then it's going to go away. And then there's nothing to help move forward. Same when you talk about that with our food. So money in general, is a tangible thing that we always talk about, but really money itself is the community, and that is where the wealth building comes from. So when you work with the community in general and you heal the community, and that's part of our mission at Tanka, is, to drive some impact back into the communities using our sister nation, the buffalo. So the first thing is we have to address, the trauma behind it, the trauma behind money itself, and really look at what that has done to our community, to our people, to our businesses. Native American Natural Foods is the perfect example of historic trauma with money. It has been very hard for us to raise the capital that has been needed. We've made some very great partnerships to come in to address some of that. But it has been very, very hard. And in this day and age right now, and this time is the time to really start going back and revisiting and addressing some of these hard issues, because money is being placed a little different now. Investments, investors, banks, like Debbie said, the public banking system, there are programs out there. Things are coming out. So really, first thing we do is we got to address that trauma. We have got to, smack it right in the front and tell everybody why we're here and why we need to have money placed the proper way for and funding in order to grow and heal and, be a healthy community. So I'll stop right there, and then I'll let Joseph and Debbie speak also.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story, Dawn. And it obviously really lifts up the level of extraction that we have experienced in this system, as well as intentional exclusion. And Debbie, I know that you have been doing a lot of work, analyzing the history of our banking system and the impact of that on our financial system. So if you could share a little bit about what that looks like from your perspective.
I think that Dawn really nailed the history of our banking system. The history of our banking system is that it is, by its nature from its inception, extractive, right? That we have very little concept of banking as something that could be by and for the people. Banking is for the bankers. It's a way for people to get rich. It's a way for rich people to get richer. And this completely elides the question of what is our money for. And in the current, there's all kinds of ways to frame public banking, and there's all kinds of history, which we don't have time for. But right now, what we're talking about, particularly in California, where we have a new law, when we're talking about public banking, we're talking about banks that handle public money. So you pay taxes, right? Those taxes go someplace faceless, and then all you know about what happens to them is you see what the government does, in which you have no input. So really what happens to most government tax money is, even in cities or counties or whatever that have voted to divest from fossil fuels, the government tax money is still in banks that are deeply, deeply invested in fossil fuels and private prisons and war machine materials and the things that you don't want your money in. And a lot of the reason for that is, of course, they like it that way. But another reason for that is that there are no banks. The banks that are small enough to be mission driven and aware are not big enough to handle the government money. And so our vision for public banks, and right now there's only one, I'll get to that in just a second, but our vision for public banks is public banks would be mission driven, community directed banks that handled public money. And so we like to think of ourselves as the bank that Native American natural foods could go to and say, listen, we need a loan to build our business. And we'd say, sure, here's a bank that we work with. We'll work with them and you. Here's your loan. You don't have to spend 3 years cobbling together a bunch of crazy agreements. We can just give you the money. That's how we envision the public banks. And I said I would say something about the Bank of North Dakota. The Bank of North Dakota is over 100 years old. It was formed out of a socialist style desire to put the income of the grain farmers in North Dakota back into the hands of North Dakota and out of the bankers and middlemen taking all the money in Minnesota. And it's been thriving for 100 years. It's extremely profitable. It has done some extraordinarily good things for the people of North Dakota, including refinancing student loans, including the country's most efficient distribution of the Paycheck Protection Plan money. But it also, and it's just necessary to say this, it also funded the attacks on Standing Rock. A public bank is only going to be as good as its mission written into its charter and the values of its directors. So just to pull it back for 1 second to trauma before I go to Joseph, what we would like to do is start healing the trauma of disconnection from public money and public money used for things that hurt the public. And with that, I'll hand it off.
Great, thank you for that, Debbie. That is, just really kind of looking at it from that lens, and I think you really nailed it with this level of disassociation, from the money and our banking system, and really understanding the ways in which it, kind of impacts our lives in so many, in so many of these areas. And Joseph, I know, you were originally from Baltimore, and I think, one of the communities that really stands out as, seeing that level of disparity in our economic system. And I know a lot of your experience is part of what inspired you to start Oberon. So if you could share a little bit around, where that was coming from, what was going on, what was the environment and context that really launched that program for you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's excuse me, it's interesting sitting in between Leslie and Debbie. It's like, literally like getting rooted, connected back to the land and like a government structure. It's just so interesting. And I mean, I think like for me and like the history of my folk in this country, it's, we've always been in that messy middle little place, right? Where it's like sitting in between placelessness and government oppression. And like that just through line kind of is just always there. It's like, y'all roam, and like, just good luck, right? Right. So, I mean, like ultimately for Oberon, like the genesis is really coming out of a couple of different systems, but one of them is the criminal justice system. And really the first company, our sort of like first business. So Oberon has multiple businesses, but we're one worker co-op, and I can talk about that in a little bit. But our first business was core staffing, and that was folks coming out of prison and jail in Baltimore City, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but knew that people wanted their labor, right? And basically said, all right, well, if this is the thing that people want, how can we create an enterprise, a business that served those people's needs, excuse me, but got us back in right relationship with each other. Didn't have a hierarchical structure that looked solely at enriching the pockets of one investor, but rather got us back working together, that we could actually have money circulate and use it for ourselves instead of hoard it for ourselves, right? So ultimately that structure, the cooperative structure, was something that Black folk in the United States have done forever. Like literally, it's just like an instinctual thing. When there's no other option, you kind of have to look at each other and say like, all right, I kind of don't even like you, but like I'm about like being together, right? I mean, like truly, it's like it's forced solidarity when it comes to being together, right? The crucible that creates, I think, is actually kind of beautiful. That it creates this idea that you have to actually find pathways to work together, or else, right? So like there is no alternative. And I think that crucible again can really create a new type of circuitry, a new type of pathway of business. And that's really where we came out of, right? So the shared struggle, the shared strife, and then a solution that was pretty simple, that was pretty fundamentally human. We, work together, move money back and forth, don't have blood clots in the system, right? A system needs to circulate, and do, right? And work and do. And I think that's the other side of it, is when we're looking at business, and our sort of like North Star is always moving, with cooperative economics, moving like the engines of business, like for humanity, right? So not against, not in spite of, but for humanity. And I think once you realize that the tools of business are just that, a co-op is just a tool. It's not a silver bullet. And like Debbie was saying, a public bank is just a tool. It's not a silver bullet. But when you're actually sitting in right relationship with the people in your community, and you're actually trying as hard as you can to work in solidarity, the tool, I think, is helpful. One last thing, and I think it's interesting here that like coming out of that just economic extraction and trying to get back in right relationship with money, it's it is a trajectory of harm, right? Like it is saying that you come from something and you're moving to another thing, right? So it's not static, and we're not sitting here just bleeding, right? Like we're sitting here and we're making sure that like, hey, let's take care of those wounds. Let's actually address that underlying issue to get somewhere. And so I'm excited about this panel specifically because I think we've got some exciting like examples of like where we're able to go. So yeah, it's a trajectory, it's movement. It's not just a static place of harm, always.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Joseph. And I really appreciate, what I think everyone is really lifting up here is how it's being in right relationship with the economic system. And, and really a lot of that has to do with how we're structuring, that system. And I think one of the things that's so brilliant, Dawn, about what you're doing, with Native American foods is really bringing back, that traditional system as a way of lifting up and empowering the people in your community. If you could share a little bit more about what that looks like specifically through your work.
Yes, thank you. So through the work and through what I'm going to say is a braid. We have 3 strands, which is Native American Natural Foods, which is pushing, which everybody knows is the Tanka bar. Fantastic. We've been around for 14 years. We have, again, the nonprofit Tanka Fund, and those funds go to our producers and to the land and to the animals to help bring those back. And then the recent one is our Tanka Resilient Ag, which will be the producers similar to a co-op. Joseph, as you say, it's not the silver bullet, but it's similar to that, but it is not a co-op, but the producers would be together to bring that market and bring the bison to the market. So through this holistic system, that's one way we look at it, because it's not always just one piece in order to heal any type of trauma. And it's taken a long time to get here, over 100 years, and it's going to take, some time to heal that. So some of that work obviously is everything that's involved with buffalo. It touches so much, and a lot of people don't understand the ecosystem itself. We're so connected with that animal. As they come back, we come back more. There's there's that connection there. It's just the more buffalo come back, the more you'll see the Native Americans come back too. Same with when they were decimated, our population was down too, because we're so connected. So through that is taking that money and putting it towards through the caretakers, the stewards of the land, the stewards of the animals, and giving them the stuff that they need in order to raise it. So whether it's for fencing through the nonprofit and equipment, or working with ranching, or how to do a sustainable and regenerative ag system, soil health, animal health, the ecosystem, all of that. So on the nonprofit, all that money goes. Now through the bar itself is the value added product, where we're taking the meat and adding value to it and selling it to the market. But also through that has been, over the last 14 years, education. We've done a lot of education through the nation. We are one of the most recognized brands in the nation, and Native American brands, and worldwide. We've been all over the world talking Tanka. I mean, if somebody hasn't heard it, I'm surprised. So we are that education, that marketing arm that moves forward to educate the public about how important it is to use indigenous knowledge, bring back that how taking care of the animal, taking care of the land, and buffalo, why buffalo is important compared to the cow-calf model. Buffalo is keystone species to this country, so it is made to be on this land. And the more you have on the land, the more it returns, from the animals to the soil to the grass, and then how healthy they are to eat. So through our work there is, by returning the land, or the buffalo, you return a lot more than that. Our economies, the environment, the people. So that is how our work is done through there. It's a holistic approach, and that's how everybody should look at it, because it's always, some people always just face one cog. It's like, I'm going to fix this cog, but all the other 6 cogs are broken and it's not going to turn. So how do you holistically look at something? And that's, that's just part of the core value of Native American Natural Foods and who we are is, we are here. We're only on borrowed time, and what we do with that and how we take care of everything is the best. And in this extractive, like Joseph said, and Debbie, it's very extractive here, and we have in our company have seen it all. Even still to this day, Native American Natural Foods still sees how hard it is with the extraction part and the exclusion, the racism, the oppression within the food industry. And I'm just going to call it within the food industry. It still happens to this day. Money talks, and if you don't have enough money to play in that game with the big dogs, you barely get to play. Even if you're trying to do something good and bring healthy food to your people, from your supply chain, somebody's, that brand that has more money and wants to come and take that, and then, so on and so forth. So really trying to call that out and say, everybody deserves food, and everybody deserves to make food to sell it to people if it's healthy. There should not be this line drawn between a small brand and a big brand. That's the trauma of our company. When we talk, we have the community holistic with the buffalo, but the company itself is, how do we continue to address this to keep opening doors for other brands, other people that want to bring healthy foods to their, and not get pushed out because somebody else has 120 brands and $8 billion. And, this brand company, not our company, but somebody else has a smaller amount, and they just want to do something good. But a lot of times you don't see those people after a year. You'll see them at a show, and then the next year they're gone. They've lost their house. They've lost everything. So how healthy is that? So we have got to, look at how to continue to help other people bring foods to, and the food sovereignty to our people. So that way you have access to better foods.
Thank you for that. Yes, and hopefully if folks have not heard about Tanka Bar now, they'll understand why it's so important to support that brand. And, I think what I've really heard as well in the last part of what you were sharing, Dawn, is, why it's so important for us to work collectively and lift one another up. And it is really this kind of collaborative, we've talked about it, solidarity approach to our economy. And I think, Debbie, when you're talking about, the public bank system, that's, putting, as you said, the public money back to the public, and control, for the public to be in control of that. And so if you could share a little bit more about what that actually specifically looks like, how that structure works, and why perhaps that bill being passed was so critical, as an example of us moving forward in this direction.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. I want to say first, I'm feeling a little envious of Joseph and Dawn in the moment, because Dawn is, with all of the challenges and all of the traumas, is also working with the very real things of the buffalo and the food and the land. And Joseph is working with the very real things of the people who need jobs and who can find jobs and can work together and work in right relationship. And us, we're working with the government, because we're making all kinds of relationships with groups like Oberon and Native American Foods, but our core work is the work with the bureaucrats and the government. And so I'm envious. But I also feel like this is a piece that has to be done. The law that passed in California was signed into law at the end of 2019. It's the first law in the country that clarifies how to make local public banks, and it was done by our sort of sister or mother group, the California Public Banking Alliance, and it was completely grassroots. We had no lobbyists, we had no money, we had nothing. We just had shoe leather in Sacramento, and we used a lot of it to get this law passed and signed. And what that is it's a pathway to how to make a public bank in California. And so the rest of the process is getting together two things, and everybody on this call and probably everybody listening will recognize those two things. One is the money and the other is the paperwork, right? And you need the paperwork to get the money, you need the money to get the paperwork, you need to deal constantly with very entrenched people who have very entrenched ideas of how it's always been. And we do our very best to convey our passion really for transformative public money. There's recently been a very, very good report on public bank governance done for the Los Angeles group by the Democracy Collaborative. And it's an excellent, excellent report. But one of the things that just jumped off the page to me was the comment that public money is handled by an overclass of bankers, investment bond salesmen, and public money bureaucrats like county treasurers and whatever. And we have to be careful when we say that, because we're working with the county treasurers and the public money bureaucrats, and they don't like being called an overclass. They don't see themselves that way. But really, it is a question of using public power and solidarity and the kinds of things Joseph is talking about with right relationship to put enough pressure on the government to be willing to try these public banks. And Leslie, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really what you're lifting up there is really the structure behind all of this and how critical it is to dissect that and really, kind of move towards more of a democratized structure, kind of getting back to like the meaning of democracy. And so we're looking at, at it from a governance perspective. Was there something else you were going to say there, Debbie?
I was just about to say, let me get one more thing in, because I did leave it out, and that is envisioning governance. This report I was just talking about is specifically about governance, and we also in the East Bay have done our own work. And what we envision, Germany has a very, very robust public banking system, which has been very key in Germany's Green Revolution. And their model is that their board is 5 people from the community, 5 employees, and 5 government people for a 15-person board. We're looking at something like that, probably with bankers and finance people, because it's not impossible to find people who are community activists and deeply community aware who also have banking experience, but it's a small group. So we want to be sure both because we care about the bank being solvent and well risk managed, but also because the optics of you have to show that you have some bankers running the show. But we want a majority of people who bring the community voice and the community values to the table. And we also want to build those values into the charter and into the DNA so that both the board and the charter are tasked with making sure we stay, I'm going to keep using Joseph's phrase, which is such a great phrase, that we stay in right relationship.
Thank you for adding that, Debbie. And yes, that's, I think, exactly it. It's bringing that community voice into a position where it has been left out historically. And I think that's a big part of what makes your work so important, Joseph, and really looking at how representative that governing body is and how folks are empowered through this structure. If you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, for sure. So maybe just a little bit of background on what the heck Oberon does in the world. So, so think about us almost like a private equity shop and a worker co-op came together to have a baby, right? So we do lower middle market buyouts, so leverage buyouts of operating companies. We also hold real estate on behalf of our members, so they have a place to live and work. But ultimately, this is all under one holding company that just so happens to be a co-op structure, right? So somebody accused us recently of being the Unilever of co-ops, as an example, right? So ultimately, the thing that we were really the design goal, right, was how can you have a structure that has economic power, that actually can get big and have heft in the market, that can be a factor, a force, right? But without, oppressing, without actually recreating the things that we were fighting in the beginning, right? And so ultimately, there's a question there. Traditionally, cooperatives have decided to federate. So little jargon term, but basically instead of having one company, they have multiple companies, and those companies buy into an association, right? So it's association of businesses, not of people, right? A really good example of this, if you're in the Bay Area, is Arizmendi Cooperative. Amazing group of bakeries. They also have a design build construction firm, and now are launching like ADUs, alternative housing units, right? So ultimately, like an association can be really expansive and really grow. But the one distinction there is it's a group of businesses coming together, not necessarily a group of people. And so for us, the thing that we wanted to do was to create not a federation, but one corporation, one actual conglomerate, one business that had many business lines or had many business units. We wanted each of those business units to have autonomy in some ways and solidarity in some ways, right? So autonomy of, hey, I'm a construction worker in the foothills of Appalachia. I'm gonna have a lot of different needs and desires than a 25-year-old Black kid coming out of jail in Baltimore. It's just going to be different, right? And ultimately, that sort of local autonomy or control has to be also additive to the whole, right? So how do you actually execute on that? The way that we went about it, and could be wrong, talk to us in 50 years and we'll talk about that. But really, like, what we wanted to do was to say, like, at your local level, at the company level, you need to have some representation. You need to actually be able to express your voice and power as a worker, right? But also, those businesses don't have a heartbeat. Those businesses are pieces of paper, like Debbie was talking about, right? And those pieces of paper don't have any volition. The people do. So at the end of the day, all the people need to be at the top of the pyramid too. And so the way that we structured it was one worker cooperative, one member, one vote, one share per member. And we equally distribute the profits based on the hours or heartbeats working in the actual company. Regardless of what company it is. It could be Oberon, it could be one of our other subsidiaries, but it doesn't matter, right? You're part of the machine, you're part of the ecosystem, you contribute to it, you should draw from it, right? And so that's really the Oberon cooperative holding company is that it's a worker co-op of all of the workers of every subsidiary business that we own, and every new acquisition, every new integration yields more members. As an example, we're looking at growing into home health, and a business that's in the Pacific Northwest that's doing 15 million in revenue. It's a growing business, but really the goal here is that it's just a pathway for membership for those home health aides, those Black and Latinx women that are right now locked out from the benefits and the responsibilities of ownership. And so that's really what we see as, like, from a structural standpoint, you need to have some governance at your local area. You need to have some control, right? And you also should have heft and economic might in the market to not get blown over by the folks that want to crush you, sort of a thing. And it's just real, right? And I think that that's just a fact. That's a reality that we need to work through right now. So from a structural standpoint, ultimately, I think in all of what we're talking about today, it really moves in a lot of ways to, like, trying to figure out ways to overcome challenges in the market, challenges in just the reality of the world. We're all coming at it from different angles, but it really, I think, is the through line there is, like, we're all coming up against challenges.
That's absolutely, I think, the perfect segue, because I think a lot of, what you all are talking about, is so powerful for the communities, for building community wealth, and for getting back to this kind of sense of collective action, and bringing power back to those who it's been taken away from, and it's not easy work. And I think we're also talking about, again, individuals who are doing this work, and we've all been conditioned in the same economic system, and so there's a mindset that really needs to shift to be able to do some of this work. So I'm interested in kind of, digging in a little bit of, what are some of the actual challenges that you all are experiencing as you're trying to bring these initiatives forward. Debbie, do you want to lead with that?
Sure. That one's going to take a second to think about. I think that the biggest challenge, and this is maybe too top level, but the biggest challenge is the "it's always been that way" challenge. People will look you in the eye after the 2008 financial crisis, after every big bank in the country is a self-admitted felon that has paid millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in fines, and they'll say, the banking system works, right? Why do you want to mess with something that works? And you're looking at them and you're going, it doesn't work. It's a disaster, right? I could just go, I don't want to spend this time riffing on how bad the banking system is, but the truth of the matter is it doesn't work, but people believe it works. And what's more, they believe that nothing else could work. And so all of the challenges, it feels to me like all of the specific challenges come from that. We're talking a lot about California because Joseph and I and Leslie are all in California, and I know California is not the country, but California had a county bankruptcy in the early 1990s that was a simple, unambiguous case of a greedy county treasurer who put money in things he shouldn't have put money in and lost it. But when we talk about public banks, everybody in the legislature is going to tell us, we can't take a risk. Look what happened in Orange County. And it's like, yeah, that was 30 years ago and it wasn't this. But the fear of risk and the fear of being the person who makes the wrong decision, right? We need county supervisors, we need city council people, we need city and county treasurers. And we're fortunate in the East Bay that a number of these people are active progressives, but there's such a resistance to being the person who throws the switch. It's like, what if it's wrong? What if I throw that switch and then I go down in history as the person who threw the switch and the train went off the track? And we're like, what if you throw the switch and you go down in history as the person who threw the switch and things got better, right? But it's very, particularly when you're talking about money, and particularly when you're talking about the massive amounts of money that are public money, people are so afraid of doing something wrong that they very frequently won't do something that might be right or could be right. And, I heard Joseph say, ask me in 50 years if this was the right track. We believe it's the right track. Do we know? Can I look a county treasurer in the eye and say, I can absolutely 100% promise you that this will make things better? No, I can't. I can just say, what you're doing now is making things worse. And you have to cop to the fact that your system that you believe in and trust isn't working. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Debbie. And I mean, it's just so important, the fear of risk, that you're bringing up, and the fear of, making the wrong choice. It's a leap that we're taking. We're stepping out of what we've been told is the right way to do something. And we're a wealthy nation, supposedly, it depends on how you mark that. So, so yeah, I mean, I can imagine as well, like kind of that leap that, that you're having to see your people take, Dawn, after centuries of being told, what you were doing originally was wrong. This is how you're supposed to be doing it. Follow our system. We're going to kind of strip you of everything that you knew culturally. So, what has it kind of taken? What are some of the challenges that you've experienced and, kind of working with the community to move back in this direction?
Now I'm going to switch to the nonprofit side and kind of talk about those challenges a little bit. Native American Natural Foods, we know some of those challenges there, and I've expressed a few of them, but on the nonprofit, when we're talking about placing money, our nonprofit is focused on giving funds to the individual caretaker. And there's a lot, and it's kind of what, like Debbie said, it's always been, and that's how it is our biggest challenge is three things: is giving them access to the opportunity, the access to the land, and access to the capital. Those were the three things that were never giving to us. We're going to give you the land, but we're going to tell you how to use it, and you're not really going to own it, and we're going to tell you how to run it. So just enough to go ahead to not succeed. So those are the three biggest challenges, and for the nonprofit, it's being able to get enough capital to those producers or to those caretakers to take care of it. That's been the biggest challenge there. It's going, we do have quite a few donors on that side, but when you're looking, the animal does all the work for us. I'm going to have to say, they make it easy. You put them on the land and you take care of them properly. The way the land changes and the animals, it's just absolutely amazing. You can just see the difference once you put a bison on land and the change of the ecosystem as it goes forward. So they make that part easy. The hard part is making sure that we give them the land and enough opportunity there. So on the nonprofit side, that's what I would say are the biggest challenges. There's plenty of programs for the tribal producers, because most people will hear, well, there's all these programs out there. Well, yeah, they're out there, but they're for the tribe. It's a tribe-owned herd, not the individual that Don Sherman sitting over here on 200 acres that's raising 60 buffalo or 30 buffalo or whatever that ends up being, 10 buffalo. It's not for that person. It's for the tribe, for a government-owned entity, or for that tribal sovereign nation, and then or for on there. So that's the hardest part for us, is to be able to redirect into an individual, because there are programs out there for bison, but just not for the individual producers. So that's the biggest thing for us of why we stick to, we do help all the other producers too, the tribally owned ones and the co-op owned ones, but our focus is the individual to make sure to help lift them with the raising.
Thank you for sharing that, Dawn. And, I think kind of the education piece that I'm hearing, in that as well is so critical. And, and I think when I think about the work that you're doing, for example, Joseph, you're asking people to move from being, being consumers to owners, and so there is, such an education that has to, come alongside that. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, totally. So, and it's interesting, I think we're all straddling a couple of different things, but Don, the way that you spoke about like on the nonprofit side and on the for-profit side, it's just funny that we have to integrate, right? We have to like integrate all of these structures and systems and things. So yeah, but so ultimately, every new acquisition that we do, every new business that we go out and buy from a seller, right, from an individual owner or a set of owners, we pay for, right? So there's one thing that's just like, we got to have a big pile of cash somewhere in order to pay for those businesses, right? Of course, we use outside leverage, we use banking partners, all that kind of stuff. But there's just the need for capital in order to actually go out and do these acquisitions and do the ones that are catalytic to the communities that we're trying to get, to be a part of our membership, right? So that's one challenge. And I think, and just pointing back to the risk conversation too, it's like, it is so interesting talking to capital allocators about risk when we're, it's like this business has had $2 million of EBITDA for the past 15 years. Like, what risk are you really, consistent and growing? Like, what risk are you talking about here? It's like, but this co-op thing, it's like, so allowing more people to feel more bought in and more in ownership capacity, like that's a risk. Okay. I mean, I'll take it, and like, we'll mitigate those. But, so it's interesting that way. But then the second piece is like, when we do an acquisition, getting folks to understand exactly what that means. I see that not as a risk, as like there is some risk there, but there's a huge opportunity when it comes to just wrapping somebody in what we're trying to do. And for us, we've got like 3 key big buckets of work. It's, our dollars, bills in people's pockets, right? Exchange value of the business. How financially stable is it? How financially stable are you as a member, right? And then the weird one, use value. How much is this business doing for you in a daily life, right? We bought a construction firm not just because construction in the market that we were in was growing, it was, but we did it because we knew that our members needed housing. And that's a utility that the business can bring to that community, not just our members, but their families and their extended families. And so like that to us was high exchange value. You got a lot of money moving through the machine into people's pockets, so that's supporting their daily life, but high use value. Can you actually use the thing that we're creating to make your life better as a member or as the customer that we're serving or community that we're a part of? And then the last and really, I think most important is voice and power. How much do you get it? Do you get the system? Are you able to express your individual power in the machine? Like, how engaged as a citizen in the United States are you? I think it varies by a lot of things, and proxy on race, proxy on class, folks got a big awakening this, two elections ago, and then the last election, like folks didn't realize what the hell was going on, and that's a civics lesson. And like, truthfully, we think that a big outcome of what we're doing is awakening people to the fact that they can actually use the systems and structures, not just in Oberon, but in their local government, in their city government, in their national government, right? They can actually change stuff for themselves. And like business as a vehicle for those values, business as a vehicle for that education is like part and parcel of what we're up to. And yes, make money, make it useful to you, but for what? For what's the purpose, right? And like, that's your voice and your power that you should dictate. And I mean, like, we want to be everywhere, right? Like, we want to be in every industry. We want to have an inroad into every type of people. But ultimately for what, right? Ultimately for what goal? So yeah, I mean, those are the big challenges for us. I mean, getting that pot of money, making sure people are educated on it and why it's important, and then actually operating in the market, right? Actually delivering a really good product and service for whoever it is that we're serving in that business.
A lot of what I've heard in your examples, Joseph, is, and as you just said, is how you're using the system and the structures. So how can we use what's existing to bring us to, a place where we do have an economic system that is inclusive, that is caring for the people. And so I'm curious in hearing from you all, you know, what are some of the existing tools and structures that you're able to draw from, and you know, and also particularly, you know, from my perspective as somebody who's with an impact investing firm, you know, what does it take, you know, for us to really be a true partner in this work? What, you know, what can we draw from to support these initiatives? So I'll let Debbie, what are some of the systems that you're able to draw from, and how can investors perhaps play a role in this work?
I'll answer that happily, but I just have to say first that Joseph reminded me, we really, really need to talk about money for what it's for, right? We talk about money as if it were what it's about, and it's not. Money is what it's for. And I just want to underscore that, because he said it so well and it felt so strong to me. So to get to the existing structures, I think that in the public banking movement, we rely on two very different kinds of existing structures, leaving out the government, which is the existing structure we're trying to move. We rely on the amazing community organizations that are all over the country. We collect community support. We try to make very sure that there are a great many BIPOC and Brown and other impoverished or marginalized groups in support, that that we work with them to understand their needs, and that they work to understand ours. And then when there's a big government push, we have 50, 60, 90 groups that come out and support. And that's what the government listens to, right? We have unions, we have environmental groups, we have neighborhood associations, we have all permanent real estate cooperatives, land trusts. So that is one set of existing organizations, existing systems that we rely on. And then the other, speaking directly to Leslie, the other is the giving system, right? The philanthropic system. It took me a second to find the word. Most groups that are doing this, are doing what we're doing, are doing it entirely, trying to do it entirely with government money. And we certainly want government money, but we feel like one of the ways that we can make sure that our visions of governance and our visions of mission and values are heard is by bringing some of our own money to the table. And by our own money, we mean donated money, right? We have grassroots donations. We are starting to make relationships with foundations. We got a generous donation from one of the very well-known environmental groups. And the conversation, everybody in this panel knows this. When you bring your own money to the table, the conversation shifts. When you go to the government with your hat in your hand and you say, it's going to cost us $2 million to start this bank, give us $2 million, they don't hear the rest. But if you go to them and say, it's going to cost us $2 million to start this bank, and we're bringing $1 million of it, do you have the other $1 million? Then it's a different conversation. And then you can say, yes, we have a right to make sure the board is majority people of color. We have a right to make sure the board represents the community values because we have a stake in the game. And do I like it that way? But again, it comes right back to what does money do, right? Not what money is, but what does money do? What does money bring? And one thing money brings in this world is power. So yeah, I guess that would be my answer.
I'm going to hop in really quick, Leslie, on that one.
Yeah.
I'll just take a quick minute. I want to kind of talk about my analogy. I always tell you, everybody is build, one thing for us is to face that challenge is, building our herd is what I say, build your herd. Those people around you, that's going to make you successful. Candide, for example, I'll use that. It's been a great partner for Native American Natural Foods, as well as Nyman Ranch. They have come in as a partner also. So what Native American Natural Natural Foods has done is built the network or built the herd. Everybody that's going to help you be successful and walk forward and roll up their sleeves and work with you. So from partnerships to friendships to business relationships to government relationships, we have built many government relationships. Just like Joseph has says, you need to go and speak to go to DC, go to your local offices, really start talking about the impact that you can make in our industries, so food sovereignty, regenerative ag, soil health, things such as that, and really push it, because that stuff is out there. And then we found those partners with the like mind that weren't scared to say, Native American Natural Foods wants to stay Native American, wants Native American leadership, is a minority business and certified. We want to stay original and authentic in who we are because of those values, and finding those partners that's part of Money as Medicine. We were able to bring that money in and keep that integrity intact. And that's important. That's how you heal the trauma, is allowing people to move forward. But with that herd, we know there's challenges. We know that there's things going to come up. So most people don't know this, but bison, when they're in a snowstorm, they face the storm. And people have heard me before talk about this, but you take your herd and you face the storm. You know that it's going to be rough and you're going to get into hard times, and that snow is going to be beating on you, and you're going to be trudging through deep snow, who knows how deep or how shallow it's going to be, and you're going to be cold. All that stuff is going to come at you in your business, no matter what your business is. We all know that. You hear more no's than yeses. So you just keep facing that storm, and they walk towards the storm because they know that they are going to come out of that storm. The bison do. And they're healthier for it because of that, and they're stronger. And that's how Native American Natural Foods faces everything. We face the storm. We're not scared of it. We know we're not scared of the no's. We're going to keep going until we get the yeses. But that's, one thing I always want to pass on to everybody is, don't forget, face that storm. Don't be scared. Don't be fearful. Now's the time to invest in BIPOC, invest in women. Now is that time.
And just for the sake of time, I'll pile on here. I mean, ultimately, in order to bring a workplace into the cooperative, in order to actually acquire a firm, we need an equity slice. And the way that we do that is we raise funds. And ultimately, those funds, just like any other capital fund, is, we're using your money for the time, and we're going to give it back, right? So we're going to use it for a time, but we're going to give it back. And, ultimately that idea of the risk adjusted return, what does that mean to you? And to me, it feels like getting in right relationship, again, with us, with the people who are using your money, not the money manager, right? So not necessarily the fund manager, but really the human beings at the end of the day that are actually using your money to do things in the market. That's what we offer, right? We offer a window into what that work is, as opposed to just, well, I've got this year-over-year return of X or Y. And it's like, yeah, that's great. We'll give you that. But why? For what? And you get a chance in relationship with us to actually see that happening daily, right? Across multiple industries, again, diversified, all the good stuff. But why? And then the last piece of that is education and how we tap into philanthropic resources. I mean, yes, we want to be able to bring folks into that full understanding, that full realization of their voice and power within a system. And that is unlearning, and unlearning costs a lot of money, right? Just period. And so for us, the way that we've been able to do it so far is, we really want to, front and center be about it. Right. And that has been enabled through some philanthropic funding, but it also has been enabled because the profitability from our underlying subsidiaries, a portion of it goes to that education. Right. For us, that is how important it is for us to make sure that folks are in right relationship and learn together about what there is to do. Just being very, very tactical and very specific, it's in all of these cases and all of the things that we're doing, there's an initial upfront cost. And that cost is going to be borne by someone. And to me, if you're an investor, if you're somebody who's wanting to walk with, don't, look at it from afar, right? Walk with the person and actually do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I know that we are at time, but I just really appreciate, those final thoughts as we're thinking about, really being in right relationship and moving through this journey together, and know that, we're going to face some storms, but it's not wanting to back away from, these initiatives, this work, these people, when it is difficult. That's when you need to lean in more. And so I really appreciate all of the thoughts and the wisdom shared here. I know we could go on much longer, but happy to welcome Miguel to close us out.
I just want to thank you so much for your amazing presentation. I think we all learn a lot from what you are doing, and something different, about the traditional economic expectations that we could have. And I hope in the future we can collaborate again and extend the information that you are providing today. Thank you so much. And so next is going to be the keynote of Dr. Ann Lopez. But so thank you. Now this is I think is it, and we're gonna talk again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So if you want to leave this room,
Everybody.
you can click at the bottom. There is a